Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The sun was slowly setting over the wide avenue lined with gleaming cars and glittering shop windows. In the bright lobby of the Prestige Motors dealership, the air was filled with the smell of new leather and the subtle scent of fresh paint. The cars on display, each more luxurious than the last, seemed almost untouchable. Sylvester Stallone entered calmly, wearing a long dark coat and sunglasses, as if to go unnoticed. His hair was slightly tousled by the evening wind, and his face displayed a serenity that contrasted with the hustle and bustle of the place. He simply wanted to admire the collection and possibly leave with a rare model he'd been coveting for months. He had barely crossed the threshold when a nervous young employee, unaccustomed to dealing with demanding customers, approached him. Behind the counter, Greg Thompson, the dealership manager, eyed him with barely concealed contempt. His first impression, another pretentious customer who will look and leave without buying. Greg walked up to Stallone with a forced smile and a condescending tone. "Sir, excuse me, but we have a lot of customers at the moment. I'm not sure we can help you right away." Stallone remained silent, his eyes hidden behind dark glasses, but his calm imposed a strange tension. He didn't answer right away. Every movement, every breath was measured, almost theatrical. At that moment, no one knew that the man in front of them, seemingly a simple visitor, was not an ordinary customer. In reality, Sylvester Stallone was the new owner of the dealership, and this hall they looked at arrogantly would soon become the scene of a lesson Greg Thompson would never forget. The Prestige Motors dealership lobby shone under LED lights, each car on display seeming to challenge anyone who dared approach. Sylvester Stallone walked slowly, his sunglasses reflecting the flawless lines of the luxury cars. He expected a professional welcome, but what he received made him smile inwardly. Greg Thompson, the manager, stood in front of him, hands on hips, a cold smile, and a judgmental look in his eyes. Behind him, a few employees whispered and exchanged knowing glances, some already amused by what they believed to be an insignificant customer. "Sir," Greg said dryly, "we have a lot of customers to serve. I'm afraid you'll have to wait or come back another day." Stallone took a step forward, his stature imposing despite his attempt at discretion. His voice, calm but firm, cut through the air. "I'm here to see some specific models. Can you tell me which ones are available, or should I wait unnecessarily?" Greg frowned, surprised by the man's authoritative and confident tone. He didn't like it when a customer spoke to him like that, especially since he didn't know his true identity. "Look, we have vehicles in high demand. I can't guarantee they'll be available for you. You might leave empty-handed." Stallone raised an eyebrow slightly under his glasses. "All right, I can wait. But I don't like being underestimated." The manager took a step back, irritated. The employees present began to whisper louder, some amused by the confrontation. No one knew that the man they were so quick to judge would soon become their boss. As Stallone walked toward the classic car section, Greg gestured authoritatively. "I strongly advise you to wait in the waiting area. We cannot guarantee immediate service." Stallone stopped, placed a hand on the hood of a shiny car and, with disconcerting calm, replied, "I think you underestimate me. But that's okay. We'll see how this turns out." At that precise moment, the silent hall filled with palpable tension. Greg had no idea that his arrogance would lead him to the most humiliating lesson of his career. Greg Thompson stepped back slightly, frowning, unable to hide his irritation. He was confident he could handle any customer, but Stallone's calm, confident demeanor unnerved him. This wasn't the behavior of a casual visitor, there was something different about his presence, something hard to ignore. "Listen," Greg said, pointing a finger at the door, "I really advise you to follow my instructions and wait in the lobby, or..." "Or what?" Stallone interrupted with disconcerting calm. "Or are you going to push me out?" A silence fell. The employees watching the scene exchanged worried glances. No one had ever spoken to Greg in this tone. The manager's ego was faltering. I advise you to be patient," Greg stammered, flushed with anger. "We have a lot of customers to serve. You understand, we have to respect order." "Order?" Stallone repeated, moving forward slowly. "Respecting order doesn't mean humiliating people. I'm not here to cause trouble, but I also don't accept being treated as if I don't exist." An employee dared a slight laugh, which made everyone turn their attention to him. Stallone stared at him for a few seconds, and the laughter died instantly. There was something in his gaze, a quiet but commanding intensity, that reminded us that beneath that understated exterior lurked a force not to be underestimated. Greg, trying to regain control, took a step forward. "You don't understand. We have procedures here. We can't give special service to every customer who thinks they're important." Stallone, without raising his voice, gestured towards the cars on display. "What I understand very well is that you are judging too quickly. You see me as an ordinary person. But I am here for a specific reason. If you cannot help me, I will find someone who can." The tension rose a notch. The employees held their breath. Greg felt his anger mix with embarrassment. He had never faced a customer capable of standing up to him with such confidence. And he still had no idea who Stallone really was. Stallone, sensing that the situation was reaching its peak, sketched a slight smile behind his glasses. "You know, sometimes we think we have control over a situation, but the reality is often quite different." Greg, annoyed, frowned and pointed at the door again. "Very well. If you are not willing to cooperate, I will have to ask you to leave immediately." Stallone simply nodded, letting his gaze slide over the cars, as if savoring the tense moment. He knew this confrontation was only the beginning, and that an unexpected twist would soon surprise the manager and everyone in the dealership. Greg Thompson felt his patience reach its limits. The man in front of him refused to submit to his authority, and his disconcerting calm was beginning to irritate all the employees. "I told you before, sir," Greg said, clenching his fists. "You'd better get out now." Stallone took a step back, remaining perfectly calm. His voice, low and measured, cut through the air. "Very well, if you insist. But I will not forget this moment." Greg gestured to the two nearest employees. One of them stepped forward hesitantly, but the manager stared at him intently. "Push him out. Immediately." The employees complied with visible discomfort. Stallone, still calm, let himself be guided toward the exit. He wasn't resisting, but every movement betrayed a quiet confidence that contrasted with the tension around him. As he walked through the lobby, some of the customers present looked up, curious about this unusual scene. No one dared to intervene. Greg, while maintaining his authoritative posture, turned to each employee to show he was in control of the situation. But inside, he felt an unease he couldn't explain. "There," Greg murmured, pleased with himself, thinking he had solved the problem. Stallone, now near the exit, turned slightly and said, in an almost imperceptible but serious tone, "Are you sure you understand what you're doing, Greg?" The manager blinked, surprised that the man knew his name. "What?" he asked nervously. "Don't worry," Stallone replied with a slight smile, "everything will become clear, very soon." Greg didn't understand and shook his head, thinking it was a vague, inconsequential threat. But in the silent lobby, the air seemed to grow heavy, as if the whole world were holding its breath. Stallone left, gently closed the door behind him, and the sound of the wind on the street cut through the murmur of the employees, leaving a strange, heavy void. No one inside knew that this simple departure was only the prelude to a revelation that would shake up their perception of power and authority. And above all, that the man they had humiliated had just become their boss without them knowing it yet. The next morning, the Prestige Motors dealership looked normal, bathed in golden sunlight. Greg Thompson was already behind his desk, trying to regain his usual poise after the humiliation of having to evict such a calm and confident customer. He kept telling himself everything was under control, until his phone rang. "Hello?" Greg replied, his tone still tense. A calm, collected voice was heard from the other side. "Hello, Greg. This is Sylvester Stallone speaking." The manager almost choked. His heart skipped a beat. What? He stammered. Is this a joke? I'm not kidding, Stallone replied, a slight smile audible in his voice. I just wanted to let you know that I've arrived to finalize the takeover of the dealership. Greg felt his world turn upside down. The ordinary customer he had humiliated and evicted yesterday was actually the new owner. Every gesture, every word Stallone had made the day before now took on a whole new meaning. Shame overwhelmed him. You're the owner, he managed, his voice trembling. Exactly, Greg, Stallone replied calmly. And I think we have a few things to clarify before I officially take the reins. The employees, who had heard the whispers over the phone, began to understand. Some exchanged worried glances, others chuckled nervously. The entire room suddenly seemed to be waiting for Stallone's next move. A few minutes later, Stallone entered the dealership, this time legitimately, dressed in an impeccable suit and still wearing his sunglasses. Greg tried to hide his discomfort behind a forced smile, but it was too late. The shock was complete. Hello, everyone, Stallone announced in a firm but calm voice. I assume you remember me. The employees looked at each other in disbelief. Some murmured. Is it him? Greg felt his face flush. The man he had taken for a mere customer was now the supreme authority in this concession. All the power he had thought he possessed the day before evaporated instantly. Greg, Stallone said, staring at him calmly but intently, I think we need to discuss your hospitality practices. I want to make sure that no guest is ever treated with arrogance or contempt in this establishment again. Greg's shock was palpable. Every word Stallone said hit him like a brutal reminder of his behavior yesterday. He was humiliated, but also forced to realize that a lesson in respect and humility had just begun. The atmosphere in the dealership was completely transformed. The lobby, once filled with mocking murmurs and stifled laughter, was now silent, almost solemn. Sylvester Stallone walked confidently among the cars, each step measured, each gesture calm but imposing. Greg Thompson stood behind his desk, frozen. His mind tried to comprehend the situation. The man he had kicked out wasn't just an ordinary customer, he was the new owner of the concession, the one who now held all the power. Greg, Stallone said calmly but firmly, it's time we cleared some things up. I think you need to understand how to treat your customers properly. Greg opened his mouth to protest, but Stallone cut him off. Yesterday you kicked me out, thinking I was insignificant. Today I'm showing you that underestimating someone can be costly. The employees, who had witnessed the scene the day before, stood at a distance, whispering among themselves. Disbelief and fear were evident on everyone's faces. I'm going to reorganize this dealership, Stallone explained, turning to the group. Every employee must understand that respect and professionalism come first. Those who cannot comply will have to consider finding other employment. Greg felt a chill run down his spine. Everything he'd thought he could control was now out of reach. Stallone approached him, calmly placing a hand on his shoulder. You had a lesson yesterday, Greg. Consider this a fresh start. But know that I will not tolerate any arrogance or humiliation towards our customers. Greg's eyes filled with shame. He nodded, unable to speak. The employees, inspired by Stallone's calm and natural authority, began to understand that power came from an unexpected place, that of dignity and respect, not arrogance or the title of manager. Stallone then turned his attention to the rest of the dealership. We will review our procedures, improve customer service and create an environment where every customer, regardless of their appearance, feels valued. The murmur in the hall gradually turned into a respectful silence. The once mocking glances transformed into silent respect. Greg, humiliated but clear-headed, realized he had learned his most important lesson, not through anger or punishment, but through Stallone's implacable calm and wisdom. This turnaround marked the beginning of a new era for Prestige Motors, where respect and humility would finally reign, and where the mistakes of the past would serve as a lesson to all. The dealership lobby was plunged into an almost religious silence. Every employee held their breath, watching Sylvester Stallone move with quiet confidence. Greg Thompson, frozen behind his desk, felt his heart pounding. The man he had humiliated the day before was now the supreme authority from this place. Stallone stopped in the center of the hall, slowly removed his sunglasses, and stared straight into Greg's eyes. The silence was heavy, every heartbeat seemed to echo in the room. "Greg," Stallone said in a calm but firm voice, "I think it's time you understood the bigger picture." Greg blinked, unable to answer. The employees moved slightly closer, curious and nervous at the same time. "Yesterday, you kicked me out of this dealership, thinking I was just another customer. Today, I've come to prove you wrong. I am the new owner of Prestige Motors." A murmur rippled through the room. Some employees' eyes widened, others bit their lips, unable to believe what they were hearing. Greg felt his face turn crimson, a mixture of shame and disbelief. Are you joking?" he stammered. "Absolutely not," Stallone replied, his gaze implacable. "Everything you thought you controlled yesterday was based on an error in judgment. And that error has consequences." Stallone took a few more steps toward Greg, who instinctively backed away. "You're about to learn, Greg, that respect and humility aren't optional. They're essential. Your arrogance nearly ruined your career here before it even really began." The employees exchanged glances, impressed by Stallone's calm dignity and paralyzed by Greg's humiliation. Some whispered, "It's incredible." "Starting today," Stallone said, raising his hand, "every interaction with a customer must be conducted with respect and professionalism. Those who cannot do so will have the option to leave the company." Greg, still frozen, felt his ego shatter piece by piece. He stammered, I understand." Stallone smiled slightly, a smile filled with calm authority. "Good. Consider it a second chance. But know that the lesson you just learned, Greg, will never be forgotten." The shock was complete. The employees, impressed by the revelation and Stallone's handling of the situation, immediately understood that their new reality had changed. The man they had underestimated and humiliated was now the one who decided everything. The Prestige Motors lobby was now filled with a mixture of respect and tension. Greg Thompson sat behind his desk, trying to regain his composure, but every glance Stallone gave him brought him back to the harsh reality. Just yesterday, he had thought he dominated this dealership, and today, he was a mere shadow of his former self. "Greg," Stallone began in a firm but calm voice, "I think it's time to clarify your responsibilities here." Greg nodded shyly, unable to meet the owner's gaze. "Yesterday, you kicked me out as if I were an intruder. Today, you must understand what that means. Your attitude, your arrogance, your disrespect for those who walk through these doors will never be tolerated again." The employees, watching silently, felt the tension rising. Some exchanged embarrassed glances, knowing that Greg's lesson would serve as an example for everyone. "You had your chance, Greg," Stallone continued, "and you failed. But I'm not trying to punish. I simply want you to understand that true leadership is about inspiring respect, not demanding it through fear." Greg looked down, his throat tight. I understand," he murmured. "I'll do whatever you ask." "Good," Stallone said, placing a hand on his shoulder, slowly and without aggression. "From this day forward, every customer must be greeted with dignity. Every employee must be treated with respect. And you, Greg, must lead your team with humility, or you will no longer be the manager here." Silence fell again in the lobby. Stallone took a step back, letting the scene stabilize. The employees, impressed by the clarity and firmness of his words, began to understand that their environment was about to change radically. "Remember," Stallone added, addressing the entire staff, "respect is not optional. It is the key to success, trust, and loyalty. Yesterday's mistakes must never be repeated." Greg, humiliated but lucid, nodded sincerely. He knew the lesson would remain etched in his memory. Stallone, on the other hand, displayed a serene calm, satisfied to have restored order and authority to his dealership. The employees exchanged knowing glances, some smiling with relief. For the first time, they realized that the man they had underestimated possessed not only the power, but also the wisdom to wield it properly. In the following days, Prestige Motors underwent a palpable change. The air, once charged with tension and rivalry, became more respectful and professional. Every employee, inspired by the confrontation with Stallone, began to rethink their behavior toward customers and colleagues. Greg Thompson was at the center of this transformation. Humiliated by the revelation of Stallone's identity and aware of his mistakes, he now worked with a humility he had never known. Every morning, he guided his employees by reminding them of the importance of respect and customer service. "Remember," he said with a newfound sincerity, "every customer deserves our attention and our politeness. Yesterday, I didn't understand that. Today, we're all going to do better." The employees, touched by his sincerity, began to change their own attitudes. The mocking laughter and sarcastic whispers gradually disappeared, replaced by warm greetings and respectful exchanges. Even customers noticed the difference, complimenting the staff on their professionalism and attentive welcome. Stallone, discreetly observing the changes from his desk, felt a quiet satisfaction. His lesson hadn't been violent or humiliating, it had been effective, based on natural authority and dignity. He knew that respect couldn't be bought or commanded by force, he cultivated himself, and now he was seeing the first results. One morning, Greg approached Stallone, his gaze serious but grateful. "Thank you, Mr. Stallone, for everything. I understand the value of what you showed me. I will continue to apply this lesson every day." "Well," Stallone replied with a slight smile, "true success comes from those who are willing to learn from their mistakes. You've taken an important first step. Keep it up." Through this transformation, employees realized that change could begin with a single gesture, a single example. And Stallone, by demonstrating patience, calm, and authority, had offered this model to all those who worked under his roof. The dealership, once a symbol of rigidity and poorly enforced hierarchy, gradually became a place where respect and professionalism reigned, and where everyone knew that true authority came not from power alone, but from wisdom and dignity. After the revelation and the lesson given to Greg Thompson and his team, Stallone knew that it was not enough to correct individual attitudes, the dealership needed to be completely reorganized to ensure a respectful and efficient environment. In the morning, he called a general meeting in the main hall. All the employees, curious and slightly nervous, gathered around him. Stallone, standing confidently, calmly explained. "We're going to change a few things here. First, every employee must undergo training on customer service and respect. Then, we'll review procedures to ensure every customer is treated with dignity, regardless of their appearance or position." He walked around the room, looking each employee in the eye. "Those who cannot adapt to these new rules will have to consider other opportunities. I want everyone here to understand that respect is the foundation of our success." Greg Thompson, still reeling from humiliation and awareness, nodded determinedly. He knew he had to lead by example for change to be real. Stallone continued. "We will also reorganize the workspace. The sales areas, showroom, and after-sales service will be redesigned to improve the customer experience. Every detail counts. Cleanliness, order, presentation, everything must reflect our commitment to excellence." Employees began to feel a mixture of awe and inspiration. Stallone's vision was clear: this wasn't just a physical reorganization, but a profound cultural shift. In the weeks that followed, the transformations became visible. The old arrogant behavior disappeared, replaced by a genuine focus on customers and increased cooperation between colleagues. Every day, Greg oversaw the implementation of the new rules, silently acknowledging that Stallone had changed the dynamics of the company forever. Stallone, looking around the dealership, felt a quiet satisfaction. He knew that true power wasn't measured by titles or privileges, but by the positive impact one could have on others. And this reorganization had just laid the foundation for a prosperous and respectful future for Prestige Motors. A few weeks later, Prestige Motors was unrecognizable. The lobby, once filled with tension and rivalry, now exuded respect and collaboration. The employees greeted every customer with a genuine smile, and the dealership's reputation was strengthened by this newfound professionalism. Greg Thompson, once arrogant and condescending, now walked among his employees with humility and confidence. He had learned to listen, guide, and encourage, rather than dominate. Every satisfied customer and every compliment received was a reminder that Stallone's lesson had been etched into his memory. Stallone, sitting in his office overlooking the lobby, watched the scene with satisfaction. He wasn't boasting about his status as owner or the lesson he had taught. For him, the real victory was silent, seeing his employees grow, seeing respect and dignity reappear in every interaction. One morning, a customer entered the lobby to admire the classic cars. He was greeted warmly by Greg and the team, with no trace of his former arrogance. Stallone, observing the scene, stood up and walked to the entrance to greet the customer, but with a simple, discreet gesture. "You see," he said to Greg, "the respect we give others always comes back to us. It's not a question of power or position, but of dignity and wisdom." Greg nodded, a genuine smile on his face. He understood. The dealership was no longer just a place to sell luxury cars, it had become a beacon of professionalism, humility, and success built on mutual respect. Stallone returned to his office and watched the employees work. No words were necessary. The lesson had been learned, order restored, and the future of Prestige Motors assured. Stallone's quiet victory was not a spectacular revenge or a show of force, it was the lasting transformation of a place and its inhabitants, a subtle but perfect triumph. The quiet but powerful owner smiled inwardly, knowing he had changed more than a dealership, he had changed lives.